Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Welcome back to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. Well, undoubtedly, the Irish hospitality sector has been one of the most significant economic casualties of COVID-19. With restaurants and cafes set to reopen in late June, what does the forecast look like and what assistance will they need to survive? Adrian Cummins, the Chief Executive of the Restaurants Association of Ireland, joins me now to share his vision of recovery for the sector. Adrian, as I mentioned, I think all of our listeners will appreciate that restaurant owners have been one of the hardest hit by COVID-19. But how would you describe it?
Good morning, Karl. You're right, you're 100% correct. The restaurants and hospitality sector is one of the hardest hit due to this crisis. The outlook for us is, you could say, it's going to be very, very difficult a year ahead. From a tourism perspective, obviously there won't be international tourists coming into Ireland during the summer. And so, which is important that the State Agency for Tourism, Fáilte Ireland, need to do a very impactful, high-profile domestic campaign that people should have a staycation in Ireland. Obviously, the Southeast is the prime location for this.
And Adrian, in relation to your members having to now adapt their restaurants to satisfy the requirements for social distancing, how much of an impact will this have on their overall business?
So social distancing is now the new norm in Ireland and right around the world. So what restaurant owners will have to do is to adapt and re-engineer their business for social distancing. So, for example, if we are to adapt World Health Organization guidelines, your number of tables in your business, in your restaurant, will have to be reduced so that you have the 2 meters between tables. You have all of the standard operating procedures for your staff, and that when you reduce your number of tables, well, obviously there will be a financial impact on the business because they won't have as many people coming in the doors or income for their business. So, for example, if you reduce by 40% of your income, you're going to have to look at your fixed costs will have to reduce accordingly. And we've done a very simple exercise around that, where if we reduce our income levels by 40%, well then local authority rates needs to be written off, the VAT needs to go to 0%. We need some sort of a stimulus recapitalisation of our industry, or our industry we may be allowed to open, but it won't be financially viable for businesses to reopen.
Now, there are concerns that perhaps consumers won't have the appetite to dine in restaurants for a long time after the restrictions have been lifted, for fear of being in close contact with other people and, of course, food hygiene concerns. What are your thoughts on that?
I think consumers will have concerns. It's up to our industry to allay those concerns and make sure that people are comfortable coming into our premises. And obviously the mindset of consumers needs to adapt to the new norm. So, for example, consumers don't have a major issue as we speak with regard to retail. So when they go into a shop or a supermarket to buy their groceries, to get their trolley, they walk around, they may be close enough to a person, they may not. But social distancing is the norm within a retail operation. So if you picture a retail operation and you transpose it into a restaurant, it's the same principle. It's about delivering food from a kitchen to a table, and that table has customers on the table. And I think it's about trying to educate staff and consumers that it is practical and possible for us to operate within this, and try and bring people on a journey, because it's going to take a bit of time for people to understand the new norm, you could say. And we're learning as well. We're looking at developing standard operating procedures that we can send to businesses so that they know exactly what's required.
But in terms of that comparison between supermarkets and restaurants, one is a necessity and one is a nice to go to.
That's true. I take that point. People will always say that your restaurant is a luxury item. It's disposable income that that you don't have to spend. And I have to say this, and people we've seen throughout the lock-in, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, people wanted to get out and engage and get out of their home. And the restaurant, I believe, is going to be the new community hub. Now, it'll have to have checks and balances in place where, you'll have limited number of people at a table. The tables will have to be separated, but at least you'll have somewhere to go to and have a meal. And I think that's where people's minds are. It's going to take a bit of time now for people to realise that, it will be safe to go into a restaurant, provided that the consumer does what he or she should do.
And are you calling on behalf of your members on the Department of Local Government to be flexible with restaurant owners across the country in providing them with outdoor space to be able to make up for that lost space that they have indoors?
Absolutely. This is feedback that we've got from business owners around the country that, we need to think differently in the new Ireland that we are and, under COVID-19 regime. And outdoor space can be utilised. There are countries like Croatia, Spain, Mediterranean countries, I do get that have better weather than us, but they are utilising outdoor space. And we need to have introduced what I would call a continental style atmosphere within towns and villages where your tables and chairs outside on the footpath or maybe on a street area where possibly a loading bay might be turned into a tables and chairs area that people can sit down and have a snack, have a meal, have a whatever. And we need to think differently. And local authorities need to come on board because they're going to have to play a big part in this. Because if businesses don't get up and running and get reopened, well, then that income that's due to them, that rates won't be able to be paid. Local authorities won't have that money coming in, so the services won't be able to be provided to communities and people around the country. So it's in the best interest of everybody that we, think differently, we open up outdoor spaces, and we do it as easily and as efficiently and as cost-effective as possible.
Are you also encouraging your members to look at adapting their business to takeaways and offer collection services?
Absolutely. The restaurant now won't be just a sit-in, sit-down. They're going to have to look at other areas of how to engineer their business and modify their menus and then also you need to look at how do we deliver it from A to B. So there's work at hand, a challenge there for our sector, and we can do this. There's no doubt about it. It's achievable.
And what supports are there for restaurants that need to put in place a COVID-19 compliance plan to take into consideration, let's say, social distancing, along with all of the relevant food safety and health and safety considerations, Adrian?
So we are working with the Fáilte Ireland, who in cooperation with the HSE to develop guidelines. They should be ready very, very soon. For the industry ahead of any reopening. We can do a lot of training online to train our staff. Like other sectors are doing this. I saw it in construction, I've seen it in retail. So hospitality is going to be no different also. And I think the most important thing is for your listeners is that we want to open our doors as safely and as efficiently as possible, and we want to get people back to work and get our staff re-employed. I think that's our most important thing, is getting our staff back into gainful employment.
And are you satisfied with the level of supports that government and especially agencies like Fáilte Ireland have already provided to the restaurant sector in order to facilitate that?
No, we're not, actually, to tell you the truth. And there's no criticism of any politician. It's just there seems to be a lack of understanding around what hospitality means to the country. And I think there's it's now resonating how important it is. There's 250,000 people that are on the live register that are come from hospitality. And that is a massive workforce that can be brought back into gainful employment very, very quickly. And the issues around getting the VAT to 0% protection for commercial tenants and other measures as well will help the restaurant industry, the hospitality, tourism industry get up and running again. And what we need a champion at the cabinet table that is the person that represents, like what the farmers have in Department of Agriculture, that you have somebody that is there fighting your case at the cabinet table and getting the proposals, the measures over the line.
And Adrian, from your insights into the restaurant sector across the country, what is the primary concern for restaurant owners today?
The primary concern is effectively keeping their business alive, being able to reopen in a manner and fashion that's financially viable for them.
And is there financial supports in place for them to do so today, in your opinion?
No, there isn't. There's financial support available, but what we've seen is that the interest rates have been provided for them, which is around 4.5%. It's not viable for a business to be taking on loans upon loans. It's not more debt we want. It's a grant aid. It's an assistance like what a farmer would get, where they would get direct grant aid. And that's where businesses want. And we've come up with a solution and a package that is with the Department of Finance, which is viable. It works for the taxpayer, and it also works for business owners, where they are able to get money, and year one, they don't pay back any loan. Year two, they pay the interest, and year 3 and 4 and 5 is turned into a term loan when the business is back up and running.
And in terms of that convertible facility, let's call it, what value of a grant or loan would a restaurant be able to access through that?
So our proposal is up to $500,000. So it's not just for restaurants, it's for all SME businesses. In essence, it's like a bailout scheme for a small business, like what the banks got back in 2011. And money can be got cheaply from the European Central Bank at the moment. It's never as good. And we have a good credit rating in Ireland at the moment. So our plan is to go and get European funding and filter that into every small business in the country and get us up and running and get us over the next 2 years until we get ourselves back on our feet.
I do want to talk to you about the Revenue Temporary Wage Subsidy Scheme. That has been a very, very valuable grant to businesses over the last number of weeks in terms of supporting their employees. Would you like to see that scheme extended beyond 12 weeks, and if so, by how long?
Well, our ask would be that it would be extended for at least 12 months. We are realists around this, and there are certain cohort of people that have been left out of the wage supplement scheme, which is seasonal workers. They don't get it. Over people that are working and over 66, they don't get it. So there is areas that it should be tweaked. Now, if they were to phase it out, we believe that hospitality is one area that should be the last to be phased out. And why I say that is because we will be the last to get our doors back open and get back to recovery. So obviously certain sectors need more support. And the wage supplement scheme, while it is good, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing that we have at the moment.
Also included in your 9-point plan is VAT and rent. What particular accommodations are you seeking in these areas?
A lot of restaurants are rented from landlords, and landlords can be private individual landlord, or they can be from some of the commercial landlords, which possibly will be a pension fund. What we're finding is, and from our survey, is the average reduction in rent is about 50%. So businesses are getting a reduced rent during the crisis. And, you know, everybody has to take a bit of pain here now. So the banks have to take a pain. The insurance companies, which we haven't spoken about, need to take pain. The business owners are absolutely taking pain, and their employees. So landlords need to take some pain as well. So what we're saying is that we've looked at the French model, where the landlords will have to take a haircut on rent. The tenant will pay back some of the rent, and then a subvention from the government will come in some shape or form to pay rent. Now, they've done this already in the UK and Northern Ireland, where they gave every business up to €25,000 of a grant to pay your rent and pay your government fees and whatever it was and keep your doors open. So we've asked for that. Will we get it? I don't know. But, the conversation has to be brought. And finally, on the legal protection for commercial tenants, so we don't have any protection from unscrupulous landlords, unlike residential tenants. So we want equal measure there.
And also on your list are banks and insurance companies. Specifically, what do you need them to bring to the table to help restaurateurs during this challenging time?
Well, obviously insurance have done nothing for us, and they actually have run away from the problem. And I think there's a lot of anger out there with regard to insurance companies not owning up to the problem and not doing something around business disruption. A lot of businesses bought insurance policies on the strength of business interruption, and now the insurance companies are not paying out. So that's a long story. There's a long road ahead. But I will say that there's a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of business owners and people with regard to insurance companies at the moment, and they're not helping themselves in the national recovery.
But I do believe, Adrian, that the Financial Services Ombudsman is stepping in there and is advising business owners go directly to the Ombudsman office with the complaint, and they would look at resolving it as soon as possible for them. Are you hearing anything about the success of that?
Well, we're due to have a conversation with the Financial Ombudsman, but if you go into that process, it could take you weeks, if not months, to get a resolution, or it could get you more than a year. So if the Financial Ombudsman comes to the table and says, we'll turn around cases within a month, so be it. Let's look at that. We will engage with the Ombudsman. We have sought our own independent legal advice on it. And it turns out that 30% of the policies that we've looked at have absolutely they can get a claim. 30% are in, we'll call it, in no man's land, and then there's about 30% that don't. But you could safely say over 60% of businesses should be able to get something in some shape or form. But the message from the industry is, from the insurance industry is, we're not paying up. Good luck, go away. Don't come talking to us. Well, the banks, to me, is they might talk a great shop about providing supports, but you have to think about it like this: the European Central Bank is providing loans at nearly 0% at the moment. The banks are profiteering on the back of this COVID pandemic because they're now retailing back out to the Irish public, the Irish consumer, the Irish business owner at rates well in excess of what the European Central Bank is. So somebody's making a lot of money with regard to this at the moment. And they, along with the insurance company, needs to think about the patriotic part of this crisis, because the Irish people bailed out the Irish banks 10 years ago. Now we're looking for them to do what that the Irish people did for them over 10 years ago.
In the event that these supports are not provided, what could the repercussions be for the sector across the country?
Drastic is what I could see if action isn't taken. And we have calculated that about 120,000 jobs in the restaurant industry may not come back on stream at all this year, or at all during the crisis, because it's not financially viable for a business to open its doors on day one if on their balance sheet that the expenditure still remains the same. So they're all issues around that our politicians and our government need to address. Otherwise, the 10% of businesses that remain open, that are providing takeaway service, they're the only ones that are going to stay open. And I would be very fearful for a raft of liquidations coming down the tracks right across the board, where businesses just don't, there's a time where people will just have to say, well, listen, is it worth going on? Do I just throw in the towel?
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Adrian Cummins, the Chief Executive of the Restaurants Association of Ireland. And I certainly appreciate Adrian's frank assessment of the plight of restaurant owners over the coming years. And I hope that they receive the necessary supports from government, banks and insurance companies.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.